What is this, gold finger? Or is it a sign and benefit for newbies? Sigmund rubbed his numb cheeks, looking at the ghost carriage in front of him and complaining. The two ghost horses pulling the cart were all black, with strong limbs and pale flames burning on their hooves. The material on the surface of the carriage is neither gold nor wood, and there are faint black smoke connected to the surrounding void. The relief and patterns on the surface have become unrecognizable under the wear and tear of the years, but the sense of the vicissitudes of history is coming. Sigmund is a traveler. To be precise, it was his original body, an ordinary Chinese from the blue planet, who closed his eyes forever during a passionate youthful all-nighter. When he woke up again, he occupied the body of a young man named Sigmund Skinder. But at the beginning of time travel, Sigmund found himself in a big trouble. Surrounded by wind and snow, in addition to the predicament given by nature, what makes Sigmund collapse is that he is forever trapped in the same day's time loop. Over and over again, every day is faced with the same wooden house and the raging wind and snow. For the next 27 days, he experienced hunger, cold, beast attacks, and finally found a more desperate reality after 7 deaths. The whole space seems to be in nothingness, and the surrounding boundaries are bottomless darkness. Until the 28th day, the monotonous cycle finally turned around. At the moment when the cycle alternated, in the endless darkness, there was the sound of horse hooves, and then the ghost carriage burning with flames appeared in front of his eyes. It's a girl, it's a girl. Beautiful skin, white skin, and long legs. If there will be a new guest in the carriage in the next second, then please bless me. In Sigmund's wild thoughts, the car door was slammed open, followed by a burst of flames, the ancient parchment rolled slowly, and at the same time, countless information poured into his mind. The next second, Sigmund subconsciously stretched out his right hand, and the parchment rolled into his arm. Pat! He stepped on the ladder to board the carriage. The target is locked, the contract is concluded, dear sir, you have become the new owner of the nightmare carriage. The space inside the car is much bigger than Sigmund imagined. The soft couch, coffee table, and wine cabinet are all available. Now he doesn't look like he is in a carriage, but in a well-decorated parlor. Underfoot is a hand-sewn wool carpet, the surrounding walls are also covered with wood-colored planks, the overhead chandeliers are gorgeous, and the sofa under them is soft. At this moment, a faint voice sounded from the ear. Dear master, the carriage is about to start, and the journey is boring. In order to kill time, the following services are specially prepared for you. 1. Delicious food, beer, beverage, mineral water from all over the world. 2. All-encompassing books can both cultivate sentiment and pass the time. 3. Rare and precious toys for your viewing. 4. This entry is not convenient for public display. It's quite human, even knowing how to make a basic classification. Sigmund smiled. The first 3 categories are easy to understand, but what is the 4th one? I want to see how inconvenient this inconvenience is to show it publicly. In his mind, Sigmund chose the 4th category with his mind. Sorry, dear master, the nightmare carriage is temporarily unable to provide you with this service. Your request has been recorded, and we will search for suitable women for you as soon as possible. Female. Sigmund's pupils dilated violently. What? Why is there such a classification on this car? No, it's just a carriage. It's normal to talk about life after loneliness. Besides, there are many types of services. Next time, I must experience it myself to see if it's the serious one or the non-serious one. If it is the latter, Sigmund feels that it is necessary to criticize him severely. Sighing, he clicked on the first category. Trapped in a time loop for 27 days, Sigmund has no food source and drinks melted snow when he is thirsty. Hungry to a certain extent, apart from resetting his body state by death, the only food he can choose is the corpse he left outside. The longest time, he endured 10 days, and finally ended in suicide. So now, whether it is mental or physical, they all yearn for a hearty meal. Nilfgaard's military barbecue, the favorite of Nilfgaard's soldiers. Yanen's bloody cocktail, it comes from the simple and honest Yanen, where the cocktail is unique. It is said that this special liquid is mixed with real blood. This particular drink is more charming than alcohol. Dante's cheese pizza, the special baked bird eggs of the undead in the north. Looking at it, Sigmund suddenly realized a problem. How come the names of these things are so similar to the many games I've played in my previous life? Thinking to himself, he quickly opened the remaining two categories. Sure enough, books, rare treasures, some of which he had heard of, and more things he had never heard of. Can you provide me with everything here for free? Sigmund thought to himself, and soon the carriage gave a positive response. What are you waiting for? Take one of each barbecue pizza, and 10 barrels of Livia beer first. Sigmund stretched out and lay on the sofa, but the next second, he suffered a merciless mental blow. I'm sorry, dear master, because of insufficient inventory, we cannot provide you with the above services temporarily. Your request has now been recorded. What do you have? Feelings of ups and downs, after a long while, Sigmund only uttered a word. In the next second, the 4 classification options disappeared, and there was only a book and an apple left in front of Sigmund. Strengthen the fruit. After eating, it can comprehensively improve various physical fitness. UU reading www.uuganshu.com includes but is not limited to strength, agility, endurance. Book of Enlightenment. After reading, you will gain spiritual power and enter a state of extraordinary enlightenment. Your physical fitness will be improved in a short period of time. Please pay attention to timely replenishment of nutrients and balance your mental state. After enlightenment is completed, special abilities will be awakened. In the literal sense, Sigmund quickly understood the effect of strengthening the fruit, but he was curious about the Book of Enlightenment. Spiritual power, transcendence, special ability. It seems that this world is not a simple machine and factory. The world in which Sigmund Skind lives is relatively close to the 19th century of the last generation in terms of historical process. The steam is roaring and the factories are everywhere, but the details are very different from the previous generation. Curious, Sigmund opened the Book of Enlightenment and bit the apple. The brain roared, and at the same time, the picture in front of him shattered, the exquisite carpets and gorgeous decorations disappeared, and replaced by the closed carriage and the dampness mixed with the smell of sweat. Sigmund's side was full of sullen-faced men and women dressed in sackcloth. There was an abnormal noise from outside the car, and they were obviously in the middle of a moving carriage. After the bump, a big furry face with rosacea lifted the curtain and squeezed in. Bihaya Villa is here, get out of the car. The man swept over everyone's faces with a picky look, and finally stopped on Sigmund. He grinned, revealing a mouth full of rotten teeth. Lucky boy, get out of the car and follow me. Sigmund blinked, his heart shrank violently, and then he heard the man continue, it looks good, Master Nick should like you. What's the situation? Not bad, young master, like me. Horses were racing in Sigmund's heart, and it seemed that because of the long sitting and bumps, even his buttocks were a little sore. Just when he didn't know what to say, everyone around him looked at him with admiration. What are you doing? Get out of the car quickly, and divide it into 2 columns according to men and women. The housekeeper of the manor will arrange work for you in person. The coachman shouted loudly. After listening to his words, everyone moved quickly. In the end, only Sigmund with a sullen face was left on the carriage. There were countless memories pouring out of his mind, and the 2 memories were intertwined. When Sigmund regained his senses again, he found that he had stepped off the carriage and followed the coachman to the door of a manor standing on the edge of a cliff. In the early spring season, the weather has warmed up, and this villa is built on the top of the cliff. One side of the villa faces the sea, and down is a steep mountain wall. The damp sea breeze roared on the top of the mountain with the cold air of early spring, and the servants who were only wearing thin linen clasped their shoulders. At this time, the memory of the original owner merged with the soul of the other world and the youth of the small town. Sigmund finally figured out the cause and effect. Although his life was not rich, he was also stable. My father is a skilled perfumer, the kind of skilled craftsman who can formulate finished perfumes according to the molecular formula, although he has no talent. He is employed by a large perfumery workshop. Although the work is hard, he can provide his 2 children with learning opportunities in the spare time. But not long ago, another worker of the perfume workshop was found dead in the workshop, and his father became a major suspect and was arrested by the police at the first time. The original Sigmund's kinder, although he has a wide range of knowledge and loves to read, he is not interested in handmade and manipulating machines. Instead, he likes those anecdotes and calls himself a folklorist. In the face of this disaster, Sigmund's so-called folklore knowledge and so-called close friends are of no use at all. He originally wanted to mortgage the property and borrow a large amount of money from the bank to find a reliable lawyer for his father. So he found a middleman named Joachim Scully under the introduction of a so-called acquaintance. But in the end, the peach trap and the Uniang contract left Sigmund empty-handed. Sigmund, who figured out the cause and effect, found Joachim and wanted to get justice, but he was beaten badly by the other party's design. At this moment, the desperate Sigmund was introduced to the coachman named Marco, and found a short-term servant employment contract. With 3 times the normal salary and a month's salary in advance, under the stimulation of money, Sigmund signed a contract without hesitation and accepted Marco's money. Then before leaving, I used the money to find a lawyer for my father. 3 times the salary. This is really a pit. Sigmund shrank his neck, the gate in front of him was dilapidated, and the manor was overgrown with weeds. No matter how he looked, it didn't look like the owner had lived there for a long time. Thinking of what Marco said just now, Sigmund instantly had the urge to turn around and leave. However, he just thought about it, but he didn't say anything. Marco received money to do things, and the other party had a contract. He voluntarily breached the contract at this time, which would only make himself more passive and troublesome. As for wanting to rely on the law to achieve justice, let's not say that you are indeed the party who breached the contract. More importantly, the justice in this world is often written in gold. Let's go and see the situation first. Sigmund clenched his fists and felt the power in his body that did not belong to him. The strengthening fruit was exerting its effect. As long as he had the heart, he could always find an opportunity to escape. At this moment, the gate of the manor slowly opened, and everyone walked through the desolate path and came to the steps of the main entrance. A middle-aged man in a black butler's uniform walked out of the room accompanied by 2 servants. His shoulders were broad, his limbs were slender, and a tailored suit could not cover his strong body. This man is more like a soldier than a housekeeper. This is the new servant you chose for the young master. The middle-aged man glanced at the coachman Marco. He looks okay, but he's a little thinner. Let's take him up. After speaking, he turned to face the other servants. Marco gave Sigmund a wink and motioned the latter to follow him into the room. The 2 entered the main hall, and the voice of the middle-aged butler came from behind. I want to remind you that you are serving the glorious Lester family. Before you really start working, you must first learn the rules. I'm Bernardo, the manor housekeeper. The sound gradually became inaudible. After entering the main hall, the 2 went straight to the top floor of the manor along the stairs. Although the surface looked dilapidated, the interior of the manor was fairly clean. It can be seen that this family once had a glorious period of time. Your luck is good. Although Mr. Nick has a quirky personality, he is barely kind. It is better to work under him than to be directly governed by Bernardo. Coming to a half-closed door, Marco stopped and knocked gently on the door. Is it the newly arranged servant? Come in. Hearing this voice, Sigmund's eyes widened suddenly. It was clearly a child. He pushed open the door. The room was a little dark, and the glass windows were smeared with thick dye, which made the whole room strange. On the soft couch facing the door, sat a fair-skinned blonde girl. The girl looked about 15 or 16 years old, dressed as a conservative noble to serve. She leaned halfway, her azure pupils stared blankly at the floor in front of her. A girl dressed as a boy. Sigmund couldn't help shivering. I admit that the technology here is perfect, but even so, I can't go on. What are you shivering for? Sigmund was thinking about it when an indifferent voice came from his ear, and he turned his head sharply. On the top of the wardrobe behind the door, a little boy about 7 or 8 years old in a nightgown was crouching in the corner with his hands on his knees. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. When Sigmund turned his head, he was looking at him with a strange animal-like look. Most of the boy's body was shrunk in the shadows, revealing only a bloodless face. Master Nick. He is the newly assigned servant, Sigmund. Sigmund, this is Master Nick. Marco's voice came from outside the door at the right time. After hearing his words, Sigmund blinked, his eyes jumping back and forth between the boy and the soft couch. This boy is the so-called Master Nick, so what about the girl? A lot of thoughts popped up in my mind. Answer my question, what did you tremble just now when you saw my sister? The little boy didn't move, still huddled in the corner, stubbornly asking. It's too cold here. Sigmund told the truth that the villa was built on a cliff, and the sea breeze was howling outside the house. Although it was cold, it was within the tolerable range. But for some reason, the temperature in the room was extremely low at this time, which even made Sigmund suspect that he was in the ice cellar. Snapped. The little boy nimbly climbed down from the cupboard and jumped to the ground. You are qualified, at least you didn't show the kind of eyes that make me sick. As he spoke, he walked to the bedroom. Sister is inconvenient, go and help me carry her to the bed. Holding a noble girl up. Sigmund's blood was surging. Is this really a serious job? As he stepped forward, he quickly glanced at it, and the noble girl not far away seemed to have no objection. But just as Sigmund bent down, the boy's voice came from behind him again. Be careful, don't knock your sister's head off. Ah, what are you kidding? Sigmund seemed to feel that his blood was gradually getting colder, and his movements froze violently. Don't be in a daze, my sister has to tell me stories at this time every day. The little boy urged from the bedroom. And at this time, getting close enough, Sigmund finally found something strange. The girl in front of her was not breathing. He held out his hand. The skin is delicate but cold. Is this a dead man? This teenager placed a dead body in his room, and then played sickly with his sister and brother? His back was wet with cold sweat, and Sigmund felt his scalp swell. No. Looking at the girl in front of him, Sigmund discovered other abnormalities. Although the azure blue eyes were deep and charming, there was no trace of vitality. He held the girl's arm and squeezed it hard. What came back under the softness was a piece of hardness, and then he found tiny traces on the girl's knuckles. It's not a corpse, it's a doll. Fantastic. The time is up, I want to listen to the story, I want to listen to the story. I'll be angry if I don't tell a story. The boy's shout came from behind, sharp and high-pitched, and in the hysteria, Sigmund felt his eardrums swell. Please wait a moment, Mr. Nick. Sigmund responded casually, then stretched out his arms, one around the girl's shoulders, and the other through the other's knees. Good wait. Although there is no comparison, after taking the fortified fruit, although Sigmund looks thin at this time, his strength is much stronger than that of ordinary adults. But even so, he felt his body sway when he exerted his force. At least twice the weight of a girl of the same size. If it was wood, it would not be difficult to explain. No wonder this young master needs a male servant. Even if two women carry this weight together, I am afraid it will not be too convenient. Possibly even ripped off something in the pull. What about this layer of film that can be attached to the outside? Apart from the lack of temperature, it doesn't seem to be much different from normal people. Even more delicate. Sigmund dared not think any more. In the room, Nick was already lying on the bed early, and Sigmund placed the girl beside him according to the other party's instructions. Next, Nick broke apart the girl's hands, curled himself up in the girl's arms, and finally instructed Sigmund to take out a 10-centimeter wooden card from the cabinet next to him. The surface of the card is covered with floating points of various sizes. Put it in. Nick pointed to the back of the girl's head. Holding the card in his hand, Sigmund was slightly taken aback. Have you never used a pneumatic phonograph? The boy's voice was sharp. Grooves, cards, machines. So that's what Nick said about storytelling. Sigmund swallowed and spit, parted the hair behind the girl's head with his left hand, and sure enough he found a shallow groove there. Crack! He pushed in the card. The next second, the girl opened her mouth, but the voice came from her chest. Baby, let's listen to a new story together today. Sister's red dress, a long time ago. Nick buried his head in the girl's chest and waved to Sigmund at the same time. Close the door and go out, I'll call you when you need it. After speaking, she closed her eyes intoxicated. Obviously there is no terrifying picture, but the strangeness in front of him even surpasses Sigmund's experience in the circular space. He didn't want to stay in this room for a second, so he quickly retreated to the door and closed the door. Ruo Wu's voice came from the crack of the door. It's obviously just an ordinary story, but Sigmund's mouth is dry and his eyelids are twitching. Next, until dinner, Sigmund fully acted as a tool man under Nick's command. He put the girl in various poses, told stories and drank afternoon tea, and even took advantage of the cloudy weather to push the girl around the deserted manor. Everywhere he went, Nick would eloquently recount the many experiences between the two of them. In addition to the strangeness, Sigmund also felt an inexplicable sadness. Through Nick's narration, combined with the many furnishings in the house, he also figured out some of the family's past. Nick's family used to run the largest doll production workshop in the city, and the dolls they produced were delicate and lifelike. But later, for unknown reasons, the loss of the most core technology led to the decline of the entire family business. Nick's sister died in an accident when he was younger, and his parents spent a lot of energy making a doll the size of their daughter. Recently, the husband and wife are rushing to other cities to negotiate a contract, leaving only Nick Butler and many servants in the manor. Finally, at dinner time, Sigmund got a moment of respite. He was hungry and came to the small room where the servants ate. Potato bacon and vegetable salad. For the servants, this kind of food was already a bit too rich, and Sigmund gave himself enough food for 3 people to eat. But not long after he sat down, the light in front of him dimmed, and a thin figure sat in front of him. The other party has sparse short brown hair, thin cheeks, bright eyes, and most especially his hands, which are delicate and do not match his identity. Your name is Sigmund, right? I'm Steve, and I'll sit next to you when I come. Sigmund glanced up at the other party and smiled. I remember you. You did sit next to me, next to the 3 people on my left. Steve was not embarrassed to be exposed by Sigmund. Friend, we signed short-term contracts before we came here. Although the pay here is good, have you ever thought about what happens after the contract ends? Want to make a fortune? Steve smiled mysteriously, then lowered his voice suddenly. I have inquired about you. You are very short of money. Your father in the police station needs a lot of money. Let's talk about it. Although Steve in front of him always gave off a feeling of being too shrewd, he was right. Sigmund does need a lot of money now. I'll come to you when the time comes. Seeing that Sigmund was moved, Steve accepted it as soon as he saw it. This guy was very appetizing, smiled at Sigmund, picked up his plate and walked away. After the dinner, everyone was summoned to the concert hall on the side of the first floor and listened to a piano performance according to the butler's instructions. This manner is very strange from the master to the servants. The new servants are only assigned simple tasks, and private conversations with the original servants in the manor are strictly prohibited. In addition, after 3 meals a day, they had to gather in the concert hall. Standing behind the crowd, Sigmund could only see half of the profile of the girl playing the piano. The melody is brisk, and apart from being mechanically dull, I can't pick out too many problems. Sigmund only worked during the day, so after doing some simple work, he returned to the servants' lounge. When night came, the sea breeze roared outside the window, and countless exhaustions swept through. Boom! The thunder roared, and lightning streaked across the night sky, and the sleeping Sigmund suddenly opened his eyes. He was awakened by hunger. At this moment, he also noticed something unusual in his consciousness. The transformation of the strengthening fruit is completed, the spiritual power has gathered, and the first stage of extraordinary enlightenment has begun. Please reserve a large amount of nutrients in time for the basic transformation of the body. In addition, in the depths of his consciousness, the sign of the nightmare carriage appeared, with a flashing hourglass on the sign. Countdown to nightmare carriage summoning. Nightmare carriage. Sure enough, it can be summoned again. Sigmund stayed on his side and waited silently for a while. He made an estimate based on the volume and flow rate of the hourglass. It will take about a week. I don't know what services the carriage can provide this time. The lists that he had seen flashed in his mind. Will there be a 4th category? But he knew that there were more important things that he needed to solve by himself. Hungry. Must go get something to eat. The sea breeze was howling outside the window, but the room was silent. Just when Sigmund was about to leave, a thin figure quietly slipped to the ground 3 beds away from him, and then crept to the door. The man quietly opened the door, observed it, and slipped out. It's that Steve, what is he going to do? Is he like me? Sigmund waited patiently for another 5 minutes, then slipped out of bed quietly and came to the door following the other person's example. The corridor outside the house was pitch dark, and only lights were lit at the door or at the corner. There was no sign of Steve outside for a long time. Sigmund didn't want to meddle in his own business, and leaned against the wall to the kitchen as he remembered during the day. Stealing food from the kitchen, even if the servant here is caught by the master, is enough to be brought to court for theft. After all, the materials of this era are not as good as those of later generations. In most cases, the target of theft is food. During the course of the action, Sigmund quickly noticed the strangeness in his body. His limbs were more coordinated, and he deliberately imitated Steve's movements just now, which turned out to be a good harvest. After a short period of adaptation, the outlines of some obstacles could be clearly seen even in the dark without lights, which made Sigmund's actions not make any abnormal noise. After a simple search, he quickly found the storage room in the kitchen. Marco delivers supplies to the manor every week. Today's shipment has just arrived, and the meat and vegetables are extremely rich. Sigmund found edible sausages and bread and swallowed them. Gurgling. If someone walks into the kitchen inadvertently, seeing this scene, I am afraid they will be frightened on the spot. Hunger. The stomach is like an unfilled bottomless pit. When Sigmund felt a little bloated and stopped, he realized that he had eaten at least 1 meal for 10 people. But his stomach was only slightly bulging. After eating and drinking, there were bursts of heat from his limbs, and his fingertips even felt slightly numb. Sigmund knew that this should be the result of extraordinary power transforming his body. After just waiting for a while, the belly that was still slightly bloated just now flattened. Eat more, there's no chance during the day. Filling up his stomach again, Sigmund packed up, trying not to reveal too many flaws. There is enough food for the entire manor for a week to be stored here. As long as you don't count it carefully and scan it carelessly, you shouldn't see anything abnormal. But if you repeat it a few times, you should be able to see the flaws. This can't be done, we have to find a way to get out of here. Make some mistakes and let them take the initiative to cancel the contract. It can't be too serious about compensation, I have to think about it carefully. Sigmund was about to take the initiative to leave after eating and drinking, but as soon as he opened the door, his body suddenly froze in place. At the door of the storage room, a tall and fat woman blocked his way. Sophie the cook. Sophie stared at Sigmund's face and pushed the door open with her broad palm, letting the supplies in the storage room fall into her eyes. Can I say that I got lost when I was looking for the toilet? Sigmund spit out in a low voice. Now he doesn't even need to think about the reason. He will be sent back to town on the charge of stealing food tomorrow morning. Pat. Sophie's broad body leaned against Sigmund and walked into the storage room, then closed the door casually. There was a little light on the ventilation window, which was the lightning that cut through the night sky outside the manor. In this tightly closed environment, Sophie's large body enveloped Sigmund like a beast. Looking at himself and the large woman in front of him, a strange thought suddenly popped into Sigmund's mind. No screaming and no talking. If she takes off her clothes next, will I lie down or resist? After all, Sigmund's skin is still somewhat handsome. Just when Sigmund was thinking about it, Sophie went straight to the place where the vegetables were placed, and picked out a few potatoes from a grid. During the whole process, she didn't say a word to Sigmund, and didn't even look at him, she just opened the door and left with the potato. What's the meaning? Heart beating wildly, Sigmund opened the door, and by this time Sophie was already standing on the chopping board in front of her work. Put the potatoes and take out the kitchen knife. Click! A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the kitchen, and at the same time blood splashed. Sophie clenched the kitchen knife in her hand and cut off her fingers on the chopping board with a blank expression. Then, as if she could not feel the pain, she followed the wound on her hand all the way up. Do. Chop half your palm into pieces. In the process, the potato that she pressed under her palm also suffered the same fate. The juice and blood of the potatoes were mixed together, and the minced meat and mashed potatoes were also thoroughly mixed. Then Sophie stretched out her left hand, and she seemed to be going to pick up the plate next to her to put the mixture on the chopping board. But her left hand had already been cut off, so she could only mechanically use the wound on her arm to hit the edge of the plate again and again. Ha 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 ha. The blood dripped, but Sophie seemed to feel no pain, and kept repeating it expressionlessly. Sigmund's eyelids jumped wildly when he saw the scene in front of him. What's going on? Is this a new cycle? This woman is just a prop, repeating her previous work. From beginning to end, except for the moment when the door was opened, Sophie didn't look at Sigmund again, and when Sigmund left, she was still mechanically hitting with her broken arm. It's just that at that time she was already crumbling because of excessive blood loss. Is she really alive? Did she find me? There were several thoughts intertwined in his mind. Sigmund walked carefully in the dark manner. He even had the urge to break through the gate and leave. Calm down, I'm still not sure that this is a new space-time cycle. The experience of the previous 28 days completely changed Sigmund, especially the loneliness and death in the process. The rainstorm is approaching, the villa is built on a cliff, and the road down the mountain is also rugged and steep, and the distance is too long. If you run out so rashly, you will easily die in the wilderness. I need a horse. In addition to escaping, it can also be used to satisfy hunger at critical times. Thinking in his heart, he moved extremely quickly and quietly, returning to his room without a sound. Today is too late. Not long after, Steve also sneaked in. The experience just now had a great impact on Sigmund. It wasn't until dawn that he fell asleep in a daze, and was woken up by the harsh ring-tone. For the convenience of management, special copper bells have been placed in all areas where servants are active, which ensures that when the master rings the copper bell in any room in the manor, the servants will hear it as soon as possible. After finishing his duties as a servant, Sigmund, who was already starving, finally sat down at the dining table. but he lost all his appetite just by looking at it. Delicious breakfast, isn't it? Steve sat in front of Sigmund with a plate. Carrot stew with potatoes. There is actually minced meat in it, it's so fresh. Steve tasted the thick soup in the spoon and said with a smile. Who prepared breakfast today? Sigmund put down his spoon. He just wanted to know Sophie's condition now. Isn't that the cook, Sophie? Steve tasted the thick soup again, with a satisfied expression on his face. It tastes really good, you should try it. What, are you interested in that woman? He put down the spoon and put his hands on his chest. She is really majestic and terrible. Listen to my advice, man, you can't deal with such a woman. Then he moved a little closer and lowered his voice. I didn't read it wrong, we are the same people. Sigmund did not speak. You can't deceive me. Although your ability is not bad, someone moved the door after I left, and you went out too, didn't you? As he spoke, his fingers swayed, and when he stopped, there was an extra simple gold coin on his fingertips, and the next second the gold coin disappeared again. There is nothing of value in this manor, if there is anything it should be in the master's room, or that Mr. Nick. And I think you're the person most familiar with that room, apart from the housekeeper and the old servant here. How about it, shall we have a big fight? The ghost wants to have a big fight with you. Sigmund didn't say anything, but Steve seemed to understand something instantly. You don't have to do it. You just need to tell me the placement and location of the items in the room. Once you get it, I can give you a third of it. This guy really is a thief. In this day and age, there is no shortage of servants who stick to the news of stealing from their masters, and Steve is clearly a seasoned criminal. I can't wait, I only accept cash, both gold coins and paper money. After the two negotiated for a while, Sigmund told each other the basic furnishings in Nick's room. He didn't do this because he was really greedy for money, but it could be seen that Steve had planned for a long time. Whether he said it or not, this guy would definitely act. It doesn't seem to have anything of value, but I believe it, your news is worth a gold coin. After finishing speaking, Steve carefully stuffed Sigmund with a ball of paper money. Sigmund didn't want to stay in the dining room after getting the money, so he left with a plate. Steve didn't tell the truth. He should have other plans, but Sigmund has already said what he should say. Watching Sigmund leave, Steve drank the thick soup on the plate. For some reason, he felt that today's vegetable soup was extraordinarily fresh. Idiot! Steve muttered softly. You don't even know what is the most valuable thing in this manor, antique gold coins. As long as I can steal that doll, I can exchange a lot of money with Mr. Samuel. After separating from Steve, Sigmund found an opportunity to approach the kitchen, and saw Sophie's busy figure in the distance. The next second, his pupils shrank suddenly. Sophie's left hand grows completely on her arm. What did I see last night? Hallucinations, individual cycles? At this time, the after-dinner music routine began as scheduled, and Sigmund also saw the white back of the piano again. Compared with yesterday, today's piano sounds seem to have undergone slight changes, and everyone's faces are confused and immersed in the ocean of music. And Sigmund finally found his purpose. The coachman of the estate, Chris. He also manages the porter keys. His work throughout the day was lackluster, and as a result, Sigmund didn't eat too much for lunch, and it wasn't until evening that he devoured his missing energy. The transformation was still going on, but in just 2 days, Sigmund was at least twice as strong as he was at the beginning. Even if some well-trained veterans are far inferior to him in terms of physical fitness, even if they don't have much experience, just relying on physical crushing, he believes that he can deal with 3 or 4 sturdy footmen at the same time. If only I could find a gun. The world's industry is beginning to cry, and pistols have been manufactured. What surprised Sigmund the most was that after the strange experience last night, the hourglass of the countdown on the carriage actually dropped a lot. According to his estimation, this can offset at least 2 days. Is it because of the contact with that woman, or did I discover something? With too little information, he couldn't draw the rules. Finally, the day's work was over, and it was late at night again. After everyone fell asleep, Steve rolled over and got out of bed, then smiled at Sigmund's place. The guy started to move. Originally, Sigmund planned to go straight to the stables, but he ate too little food all day, and now his hunger had made him dizzy, so he had no choice but to go to the kitchen first. Without Sophie, there was no similar strange incident. After filling his stomach indiscriminately, Sigmund packed some supplies, and then quietly came to the vicinity of the stables, and took a meat saw. A lantern hangs from the beam of the stable, illuminating the narrow space, where 3 horses are enclosed, and groom Chris is grooming the 4th horse. From the direction where Sigmund was hiding, he could see the unsuspecting back of the other party. Knocking, stealing keys, opening the door, riding away. He deduced the whole plan silently in his heart, but just when Sigmund was about to act, there was a loud noise from the top floor of the manor in the distance. Crackling. Immediately, the glass shattered, and a figure jumped out of the gap in the window. The man stretched his body nimbly in midair. After landing, he rolled on the ground a few times before standing up again. It's Steve. Under the moonlight, Sigmund recognized the pale face of the other party. At the same time, Sigmund also saw the gloomy face of the manor housekeeper with a gaping window on the top floor. Catch him, sister. He wants to hurt my sister. The little boy's characteristic scream came, and at this time Steve had already got up and quickly came to the edge of the fence. He dashed to the wall like a gecko, climbed the raised stone and brick cracks, and climbed over the wall in a few moments. He wants to steal that doll. Sigmund sneered. He had a deep understanding of the weight of the puppet, and Steve's strength was obviously in agility. Reading www.uuganshu.com. This guy really came in with a purpose. But that's fine. He helped me create chaos, and I could take this opportunity to ride away. This manor obviously hides more secrets, but at this time Sigmund has no idea of exploring. The manor housekeeper Bernardo came to the stable with a lantern. Just when Sigmund thought that the other party was about to leave on horseback, he saw Bernardo open his right hand and spit out a strange note. The next second, Mav Chris stopped abruptly, and then the back of the horse beside him trembled, and the horse skin on the surface was torn, revealing a mechanical structure mixed with flesh and blood. What is this? In Sigmund's astonishment, Chris jumped on the horse's back, the joints of his body twisted, and he rushed out of the stable like a manipulated puppet and a fused horse. The arms were bent at the elbows, and sharp blades protruded from the fractures. At the same time, the other 3 horses also moved, their eyes flashing red, and together with Chris, they surrounded the entire manor. Catch the thief, take an inventory, and see if the guy has any accomplices, and I'll take a look at the young master. The head of the manor, Bernardo, gave instructions and then walked quickly to Nick's room. What it is? The changes of Chris and the horses are imminent, and now the horses' hooves are echoing outside the entire manor. It shouldn't take long for the monster to bring Steve back to the courtyard. I can't go away. Sigmund's heart sank to the bottom. But at this moment, he suddenly noticed that the countdown time for the carriage had been shortened by a large margin again. Immediately afterwards, he also got another prompt. The Transcendent Enlightenment has been completed. Special Ability Awakening. Awakening. Sigmund frowned, and quickly came to a judgment. It was absolutely unwise to try to forcefully break out of the manor at this time. Now, he is somewhat thankful for his previous cautiousness. In the grass outside the manor, there may be other things hidden in the mountains. Go back first. Recalling that, Sigmund thought that he and Steve only had occasional contact. As long as he could return in time, it should not cause the housekeeper to be alert. As for the footprints, because it had rained last night, Sigismund chose a gravel path when observing the terrain, which would increase the length of his escape path and increase the risk of exposure. But at this moment, his previous caution left a ray of life for Sigmund. Otherwise, clear footprints and muddy shoes would have no way to escape inspection. Lowering his body, his senses were squeezed to the limit. Sigmund did not choose to go back along the road, because he needed to make a circle, and when he entered the manor, he would most likely collide with the inspectors. The concert hall on the first floor. I hope that the window I stayed was not closed. Sigmund himself is not a resourceful person, but he did consider the escape route of escape and failure. This is not considered meticulous, it is just that he died a lot in the space where the wind and snow circulated, and accumulated a little experience. He was very fast, the terrain of the manor flashed in his mind, and he came to the window of the concert hall not long after, glanced quickly. Sigmund stood up and pushed gently. Crack! His face changed slightly. The window left after dinner was locked. What to do? Find another way out or risk rushing out? Taking a deep breath, Sigmund's eyes were calm, and there was not much panic on his face. Facing death 7 times is enough to change a person a lot. The storage room, the concert hall, the warehouse under the stairs, or from the second floor. One by one, plans flashed by, but they were eventually ruled out by him one by one. It's too late, I can only do my best. He clenched his fists, not lacking the courage to face the crisis. But at this moment, there was a soft sound in his ear. Then the closed window slowly opened. The concert hall was dark, like the mouth of a beast squatting in the shadows. After a moment of hesitation, Sigmund jumped in. Who opened the window? With doubts in his heart, he looked into the depths of the music, and then saw the white back sitting in front of the piano. Clang, clang, clang. The dull sound of the piano suddenly exploded in my ears. In the silent night, the sound was so abrupt. Then the sound of the piano stopped abruptly, and the woman playing the piano slowly turned her head, allowing Sigmund to see her clearly through the moonlight. Appearance. There is no hideousness or blood stains, this fair and delicate face is surprisingly good-looking. The woman has soft golden hair, wears a white burqa, and has a slender waist and a slender chest. At this moment, looking at the woman's emerald green pupils, Sigmund felt that he had lost control of his body in an instant. He was in a trance for a while, and when he came back to his senses, the woman had crossed a distance of nearly 10 meters and appeared in front of Sigmund. The blonde woman raised her hand and grabbed Sigmund's shoulder, bringing her fair face in front of her, and then her red lips were lightly printed on Sigmund's lips. Such a glamorous scene would not make Sigmund feel any joy. At this moment, his mind flashed more scenes similar to the Fox Scholar and the Lanruo Temple Banshee. Don't be nervous, I'm just borrowing a little spiritual power from you. A soft voice sounded from his ears, and his soft lips sealed all of Sigmund's doubts, and then he felt an inexplicable force being pulled out of his body and transferred from the connection between the two to the body of the woman opposite. Don't the current banshees need to take off their clothes when they draw their energy? Sigmund, who was in control, spit out a groove, and then he concentrated his energy and desperately resisted the opponent's extraction. The woman who was close at hand widened her eyes sharply. She obviously did not expect to suffer Sigmund's resistance, and then the woman stepped forward, increasing the strength of the absorption through the pressure of her hands. But the next second, a sharp pain suddenly came from the lower abdomen. The blonde woman couldn't help but let out a short scream, and her upper body shrank back subconsciously in the sharp pain. Before she realized what was going on, a hard head slammed into her face in the dark. Bang! Go away! With Sigmund's low growl, the blonde woman was knocked out by him, and her slender body scratched several meters on the floor. What's the matter? How can he get rid of me? A thought flashed in his mind, and the blonde woman who was rolling saw a figure rushing towards her like a cannonball. Wait, I have no ill intentions. She stretched out her right hand suddenly. But Sigmund on the opposite side didn't hesitate at all. Bang! In front of her, Venus was scurrying around, Her head was buzzing, the poor woman was kicked on the head by Sigmund, her body swept across and hit a bench not far away, making a dull sound. After finally breaking free from control, Sigmund succeeded in 2 consecutive attacks but was not stopped. As for what the woman just said. Wait, I really have no ill intentions, if I continue, the dream I barely maintain will be shattered. The woman roared and said that her body suddenly bounced off the ground, but she didn't see how she beckoned. In the next second, the darkness in the concert hall was swept away, all the surrounding windows were opened, and a little warm sunlight poured in. This. Sigmund subconsciously stopped. Aren't you curious? The huge sound of the piano and the fighting didn't attract the attention of others, and the surrounding sunlight. The woman got up from the ground and gathered her messy hair. Only then did Sigmund notice that there were no scars or bloodstains on her face. However, the woman's standing posture is a bit strange. Reading www.youkansha.com. Slender thighs gathered together, as if they were trying to endure something. What is this place? You can understand it as a special kind of dream. I don't mean anything, I just want to borrow a little of your power to help me get rid of the control of this weird manner. The blonde woman replied. I'm Montana Manning, a female monk of the Oracle Church. I feel the spiritual power in your body. I think you should have broken the cage of consciousness, completed enlightenment, and acquired special abilities. Although there is no contract signed, you are barely considered an extraordinary person now. Then you must have seen the weirdness of this manner. The woman named Montana moved slowly while introducing herself, but her posture was twisted because of the pain in her lower body, like a weird puppet. Consciousness cage, what is that? Sigmund asked curiously. This is a process that everyone needs to go through in the process of enlightenment. Our spirits will be incorporated into a space of consciousness, where we experience many strange things. Maybe it's a desert island, maybe it's a dangerous battle. In the process, death is not the end. Montana looked at Sigmund suspiciously. Isn't there any impression? Could it be that your experience is too short? She was a little curious. How long have you been in the consciousness space? 2 days? 3 days? Hearing this, thinking of the strange experience before, Sigmund opened his mouth, but didn't know how to answer. Is it less than a day? Montana frowned. Then you are too short. After saying this, Montana also seemed to realize the ambiguity in the words and hurriedly changed the subject. The experience in the conscious space represents a part of the potential. Of course, the length of time is just a reference and can't really explain anything. The most important thing is. Forget it, now is not the time to discuss this. The longer the better, the more times the better. Sigmund tasted it. How dare this woman underestimate me? He really wanted to tell the other party the truth, and then watched this woman's mouth open wide in surprise at his 28 days and 7 deaths. Tell me about this manner. Sigmund didn't continue to dwell on this issue. These news are kept secret from ordinary people, but now you have completed enlightenment, and you are trapped in this manner like me. Montana seemed to convince herself. There has always been a secret agency in the kingdom. This agency is independent from the current military and police system and is specially responsible for solving supernatural events. These people are called demon hunters, which is both their identity and the extraordinary contracts signed on behalf of them. In addition, this institution is also supported by the Oracle Church. This White Seagull Manor belongs to the Lester family. Not long ago, there were many missing workers in the Lester couple's factory. The police officers in charge of investigating the case found unusual power in the clues, and then the case was transferred to the Witcher. We thought it was just a simple evil invasion, but after arriving at White Seagull Manor based on some clues, we were ambushed very soon. Do you have any companions? Sigmund asked. Montana nodded, a second-order demon hunter, he is the person in charge of this investigation, and is good at frontal combat, while I am a first-order psalmist, mainly doing some auxiliary work. What attacked you? The monster combined with horses? Sigmund asked again. It's not. Montana reached out and nodded her forehead. The attack comes from the spiritual level. In fact, apart from the few servants who came with you in the entire manor, only that young Master Nick and the butler Bernardo are alive. Everyone else is a controlled puppet, or a toy. The Lester family developed their business by manufacturing toys, but in recent years, with the development of industry and the continuous improvement of technology, the toys they made can no longer arouse the interest of children. After that, due to poor management and blind expansion, the family's finances have plummeted. So they found an ancient forbidden magic technique and poured it with the blood of living people, so that the dolls they made had spirituality. And White Seagull Villa is a huge experimental field. Does that kid know all this? Sigmund asked suddenly, thinking of the boy squatting on the cupboard. Montana shook her head. The Lester couple and the housekeeper Bernardo are the ones who control everything behind the scenes, especially Bernardo. After investigation, he should be a veteran who failed to enlighten. Although he couldn't sign a contract to become a superhuman, he still has some spiritual power left in his body, so he can manipulate those sorceries. I suspect that somewhere in the manor, there must be a taboo hidden, and it is this thing that affects our spirits and makes us imprisoned when we enter here. And Montana said, raising her hands, and drawing thin black lines on her fingers. After being imprisoned, Bernardo drew these things on me, and then controlled me every day for the servants who live here play the piano. This strange tune is amplified by spiritual power, and it doesn't take long for the servants here to become walking dead. Don't you think it's strange that the glass in Nick's room shattered, and the sound can be heard very clearly even outside the manor? But in the process, no servant woke up. Sigmund's heart skipped a beat. Apart from you, I'm afraid there will be no more sober people among this batch of servants. The old servants in the manor have been brutally transformed, their behaviors are fixed, and they will only follow the set trajectory. Every night is the time for Bernardo to wind up these toys. So, leave this dream space for a while, and you must not return to your room immediately. Montana continued. Only Nick and the housekeeper are alive, so the housekeeper just said to send someone to check. It was for possible lurkers, for Steve's possible accomplices, and Sigmund was shocked. The old servants are completely controlled, and the new servants are also affected. In fact, Bernardo has no living people to use at all. After listening to what he just said, if Steve really had a so-called accomplice, he would definitely choose to return to the rest room at the first time. If someone comes out of the room, or returns from outside, then this person is an outlier that needs to be dealt with. Sigmund couldn't help breaking out in a cold sweat. Although he was cautious, all seemingly correct actions fell into Bernardo's trap. But why didn't he go and search it himself? Is there anything more important than a search? Montana nodded. Looks like you've figured it out. Bernardo won't send someone to check your room, he just needs to let some old servants wait patiently in some key places. I guess the order these old servants received must be to indiscriminately attack anyone who appears. But why did he do it? I mean, why is it so troublesome? Sigmund asked. You reading www.yuyuganshu.com in order to delay the time, let you be disturbed without any precautions, and be extracted from spirituality. I guess this is part of his ritual. Montana replied. My spirituality is imprisoned, and my spiritual power cannot be mobilized. Creating this environment in front of me is the last bit of power I have left. Now I need your help. You have just completed enlightenment. Even if you have awakened some special abilities, you will definitely not be able to escape from this villa by yourself. What do I need to do? Sigmund asked tentatively. She couldn't fully believe the woman in front of her. Kiss me. Montana's fair face was flushed. Don't get me wrong, I don't have any special hobbies, it's just that after I complete enlightenment, the special power of awakening is like this. I can borrow part of the spiritual power of the contact through some intimate actions. Intimate action. Sigmund looked amused. But after only thinking for a moment, he firmly shook his head. Kissing is impossible to kiss. Maybe you have other intentions, and you are the culprit who hides. You don't believe me. Montana's chest rose and fell. What I said is the truth. Gildo and I are extraordinary after all. Test subjects like us are not common, so he has never done anything to us. She tried hard arguing, but Sigmund just looked at her blankly. Well, how on earth do you want to believe me? Montana looked stunned. It's simple. Sigmund grinned. Prove it to me. While saying this sentence, he also got another prompt. Enlightenment is complete, and the special ability Insight has awakened. Insight, has keen insight, can discover small details that are ignored by ordinary people, has sharp reflexes, and can master precise skills faster. Weakness judgment, through continuous fighting, you can find the weakness of the target character's movement and body, and this ability can also be actively triggered. The 5 senses are improved. A random sense is greatly improved. Sensitive sense of smell, after the ability is activated, the sensitivity to the breath is greatly improved. Is this the ability I acquired after awakening? At the same time, Sigmund felt that his whole person had undergone inexplicable changes from the inside out. Montana's face was in sight, but this time he found many overlooked details. With the anxiety and anger hidden between her brows, Sigmund almost subconsciously deduced the focal point of her impact just now through her standing posture. Although she is a woman, she must be in pain. Tell me, how do you want me to prove it? Montana urged. The expression doesn't look like a disguise. Unless she is an excellent actor, most of what this woman said just now is true. My reminder just now is the evidence. Don't go back to your room. If you want more evidence, you can go to the Lester couple's bedroom to investigate. There should be what you want there. But I don't recommend that you do that. Although Bernardo is not an extraordinary person, but at a low level, if an extraordinary person is careless, he will die at the hands of ordinary people, not to mention that he also controls many alienations in the manner. Puppet. Only by helping me unchain me can I find Gildo, and he is the key to us getting out of here. Montana added. No, you are not my hope, the carriage is. Sigmund thought silently in his heart, but at this moment he was surprised to find that the countdown to the summoning of the nightmare carriage was shortened by a great deal. Yesterday was because I saw something strange that happened to Sophie, so what about today? It should be the change in Mav Chris, and the experience just now. He originally planned to try it out, but after awakening the Insight's ability, it was not very likely that Montana was lying by observing him. And now, he can't think of a real solution. No matter which choice he makes, he needs to take some risks. Compared to the unknown in the darkness of the manor, the woman in front of her seems to be more controllable. Besides what you said, is there no other way? Sigmund looked reluctant. You think I will? Montana asked angrily. Bernardo uses a special evil to control us. If you can destroy that thing, maybe you can get everyone out of control. Well then, what should I do? To be more specific. Just like just now, is it all right to touch your lips with your lips? While speaking, Sigmund noticed that the surrounding space was shaking, and even the ground shook. My ability is exhausted, we will return to reality soon. Montana gritted her teeth. Enter the concert hall and kiss me. Sigmund wondered for a moment, then the space in front of him shattered, and the scene around him quickly reorganized. He found himself standing under the window of the concert hall, keeping the window open. The sea breeze was blowing, and there seemed to be the sound of an old servant walking in the distance. Only then did Sigmund realize that what he experienced just now didn't really happen. It seems like a long time, but in reality it may be just a few breaths. The window was not locked. He jumped into the concert hall, and the darkness in the room quickly engulfed him. At the end of the room, facing the door, was sitting a white figure on his back. Sigmund came to the piano and saw Montana with a blank face. He patted the woman's shoulder, but the other party was as stiff as a puppet. Montana's facial features were exquisite, but after being manipulated, she had a strange and inhuman aura, adding a mysterious charm to her. However, Sigmund just glanced at it, then ignored it, and quietly came to the door of the concert hall. After a while, when he returned again, there was a trace of understanding on his face. Montana did not lie. Bernardo did arrange lifeless old servants in the shadow of several junctions that he must pass through. If he didn't know the truth, Sigmund would have been attacked by them in his haste. Is the ability to awaken after extraordinary enlightenment random, and the extraordinary contract that the woman mentioned, that seems to be the truth of the extraordinary world? Demon hunter, psalmist, like a profession in a game? With doubts, Sigmund came to Montana again. Combined with the observation just now, he basically believed what Mona said. But, thinking of those death experiences, Sigmund felt that he still had to make some preparations. He took out the meat saw from the kitchen and put it on Montana's neck, while the latter was sitting on the low stool in front of the piano in an inconvenient state. Then he put one hand on Montana's shoulder, leaned forward, and approached the woman's face. And many more. When he was about to kiss, Sigmund stopped. Then she separated Montana's legs that were close together, supported her left foot, and kept her right leg in an attacking stance at all times. That's almost it. Sigmund smiled, noticing the anger in Montana's eyes as he kissed. The next moment the two lips touched together lightly. Different from the experience in the mental illusion, at the moment of contact, Sigmund felt as if an electric current exploded between the two. Immediately, the power within the body was pried, and then poured into Montana's body. 1 second, 2 seconds. As time passed, Sigmund noticed more emotion in Montana's eyes, which meant that the woman opposite was gradually regaining control of her body. Just when Sigmund felt his lips go numb, there was a sudden sound, and Montana got rid of the restraint of her body, and then pushed Sigmund away angrily. You just took my leg." Thinking of that weird posture, Montana was too embarrassed to say it. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Safety first. I don't want to die here in confusion. Sigmund was not embarrassed. How could he care so much in the face of life and death? The sound of a broken window came from the top floor just now. Bernardo should go to appease Nick as soon as possible. This is an excellent opportunity. As long as I can find Gildo, I can find a way to wake him up. Montana quickly recovered. How can you be sure that your companion is still alive? Sigmund suggested another possibility. I've explained it before, and if things get really bad that way, then we're dead. Do you want to come with me? Or find a place to hide? Montana asked. This woman looked weak, but she acted decisively, obviously after a lot of professional training. Let's go together. After all, the woman in front of her is a real superhuman. It is better for the two to cooperate together than to be defeated one by one. According to her, Bernardo himself is still an ordinary person, but the two of them were attacked. By the way, you said that you and your companions were mentally attacked. What exactly happened? Sigmund asked casually. When we were waiting in the living room, we heard the sound of the piano playing. When we realized that something was wrong, our spirits were seriously disturbed. The sound of the piano, who is it? Sigmund demanded. Montana shook her head. I don't know, I only saw one girl before I fell into a coma. She was wearing a royal court dress and she was about 15 or 16 years old. Dress, girl. Sigmund was startled, and a familiar figure flashed before his eyes. The doll Nick called his sister. It's the girl who plays the piano. No, it's obviously a doll. Sigmund looked puzzled. After spending the past 2 days together, he was very sure that what he was playing with could never be a living person. Maybe he was really alive when he played the piano, but later. Sigmund was about to ask for some details when Montana, who was walking in front, suddenly turned around and made a silent gesture. Sigmund looked intently. In the dim corridor, a fat and tall figure staggered and disappeared around the corner. With a little light, he noticed the other side's undulating chest and the bone cutter in his right hand. "It's Sophie." After she couldn't hear each other's footsteps, Montana made a careful gesture and went straight to the top floor of the manor along the side stairs. Sigmund also has a general understanding of the structure of the manor. The top floor of the White Seagull Manor belongs to the owner of the Lester family. And there is the only place Steve can't get close, because the key to the door is in Bernardo's hands, and he almost only wanders on the third floor. No matter how clever Steve's stealing skills were, he couldn't get close to the room that was always in Bernardo's line of sight. When passing the second floor, Sigmund heard the sea breeze pouring in from Nick's room, and the boy's frantic crying, mixed with Bernardo's comfort. The two looked at each other and saw the excitement in each other's eyes. Bernardo was really comforting Nick, and he would never have thought that a new servant in the manor had just completed enlightenment and gained spiritual power. The owner of the manor's room was at the deepest part of the top floor, with the soft carpet under his feet, and the long and narrow corridor was like the intestines of a monster. After walking a few steps, a strong sense of discomfort arose in Sigmund's heart, which made him have a sense of turning around immediately. The urge to flee. "Your confusion value has risen." Montana's soft voice came from his ear, followed by a low hum, and the strange pressure disappeared completely in the next second, and the strangeness in front of him returned to normal. Knowing that now is not the time to ask, Sigmund didn't ask any more, and the eyes of the two of them crossed each other in the darkness. They knew they were in the right place. Behind this door, definitely hides the most core secret of the manor. As the distance got closer, a familiar breath poured into his nostrils, and at the same time as he gained the ability of a visionary, Sigmund's five senses also greatly improved. This allows him to capture details that would normally go unnoticed. He always felt the breath coming out of that room, as if he had smelled it there. After getting close, Montana discovered an extremely exciting accident. The door at the end of the corridor was lightly closed. Complimenting Steve, Sigmund almost laughed out of joy. It should be that Steve sneaked into Nick's room in the dark. The guy must have done something in the room, and then caused an accident and riot, and then Bernardo arrived in time. The guy could only run away from the window. And because of the sudden incident, Bernardo, who happened to be in the top floor, rushed to Nick's room before he could lock the door. This is also the reason why he didn't go to the servant's room to check in person. He needs to appease Nick as soon as possible, then go upstairs and lock the door. This is really the blessing of the goddess. Montana also realized this problem. She didn't have time to think. She rushed to the door with a single stride, knocked open the wooden door and entered the room. "Wait a minute." At the moment when the door opened, more breath came out, and at this moment, Sigmund's scalp exploded, and he saw a flash of white light in the darkness. It was too late to remind him. Sigmund pushed his potential to the limit, and stretched out his hand while rushing forward. He felt as if he had caught a clump of soft hair in the dark. The next second, the muscles in his forearm tightened, and with a low voice, he pulled hard. "Ah! Do!" Short screams mixed with the sound of sharp blades hitting the floor. At this time, by the light from the window, Sigmund also saw the enemy who attacked them. It was a bloated and fat monster, wearing striped pajamas, and the torn tatters of the clothes were glued together with the wrapped rotting flesh. On the back of this monster, there is a slender woman. It felt like a naughty child roughly splicing together two dolls of different shapes. Bang! There was a dull crash from downstairs, followed by hurried footsteps. "It's Bernardo." He heard the voice upstairs and rushed up. Montana was on the ground at this time, and when she got up, she happened to see a majestic shadow rushing towards the room at the end of the corridor. So fast. Enter the house. At the critical moment, Sigmund's eyes were deserted. With a low roar, he pulled out the meat saw knife he carried with him and put it in front of him, and slammed into the monster blocking the door. When a critical moment broke out, he squeezed out the full potential of his body. Unpredictably, the stout monster was hit by him and stumbled, which made Sigmund break into the room. After knocking off the monster, he didn't launch an attack, but hurriedly rolled on the ground to the bookshelf not far away. Bang! At this moment, a little firelight bloomed in the darkness, and the pungent smell of gunpowder rushed into the room in the surging air. Thump! At the same time, Montana rolled in from the door, clutching her shoulders. Close the door! Sigmund roared. The disgraced Montana endured the pain, exerting strength in her waist and abdomen, and kicked her right leg against the wooden door behind her. At this time, Sigmund burst out again, slamming into the bookshelf in front of him with all his strength. Crackling! With the collapse of the bookshelf, it was like a crashing sound like a warmer, reading www. The closed wooden door of uuganshu.com creaked overwhelmed. Then came Bernardo's hysterical roar from outside the door. From knocking down monsters, closing doors, and knocking down bookshelves, the whole process is completed in just a few seconds. At this time, after a series of bursts were completed, Sigmund noticed the rancid smell and roar coming from behind him. It's the splicing monster. It really sucks. With a low curse, he rolled on the ground to avoid the opponent's attack, then rolled several times in a row to distance himself, and after standing up, he quickly looked at the surrounding environment. The room on the top floor is open. It seems to be a combination of bedroom and study. There should be several suites spliced together. There are scribbled drawings scattered on the ground, as well as doll parts everywhere. These parts are large and small, including the torso, limbs, and head. What's even weirder is that most of the parts made of imitation human beings are suspended from the ceiling. The moonlight outside the window spilled into the room through the glass, causing those messy limbs to jump in the light and shadow, and occasionally there were strangely shaped heads swaying, and the sluggish expression magnified, and being in it was like being surrounded by dense monsters. Boom boom boom! There was a crashing sound from outside the door, along with the sound of projectiles crashing and sawdust flying. At this time, Montana was not idle. She stood up and knocked down all the bookshelves near the door. Sigmund noticed that the sleeve of her left arm had been stained with blood. He was injured in the previous shooting. Chirp! At this moment, the crashing sound outside the door suddenly stopped, and then came a shrill whistle. Montana's face changed slightly. It's Bernardo, he's calling his toys. This guy is really an old man. Sigmund gasped. Bernardo heard an abnormal noise in Nick's room, so he didn't even have time to lock the door when he left in a hurry, but who would have thought that even so, this guy still set up an ambush at the door. If someone takes the opportunity to touch the door and loses vigilance because of excitement, then the moment the door is opened is when the person's head falls. Montana was not without vigilance, but in the circumstances at the time, Bernardo was comforting Nick downstairs and could return at any time. In such a race against time, even the most cautious person would have overlooked something, and if Sigmund hadn't been puzzled by the smell in the room because of his enhanced senses, he probably wouldn't have discovered the abnormality in the first place. Although she was almost knocked out by the door, Montana was quick to respond, and when she was attacked, she also saw the crisis and hope at the time. So he was able to cooperate with Sigmund and help him close the door in time, which completely blocked Bernardo from the door and created a chance for the two of them. Soon, the servants controlled by Bernardo will come to the door. This door won't last long. We have to get rid of this monster before that. Montana's face was pale, she took a deep breath, and then looked towards the end of the room, where a sturdy man was nailed naked to a stake. The man's body is covered with all kinds of weird patterns. Then wake up, Gildo. Montana let out a breath, and then took out a silver pistol from the drawer of the desk beside her. Bang! Before she finished speaking, she suddenly pulled the trigger. Montana's movements looked random, but her shooting accuracy was extremely high. The monster's forehead was instantly pierced, and black and red blood flowed out. But after being traumatized enough by others, the stout monster became even more violent. He grabbed the chair beside him and threw it towards Montana while striding towards him. Although she was injured, Montana's movements were extremely agile. She jumped onto the desk, then bounced again to avoid the attack, and then her pupils suddenly lit up. "Calm down." There were short syllables in his throat, and the furious monster instantly became dazed, and then Montana hummed a gentle song in his throat. After just 1 or 2 breaths, the monster seemed to have completely lost its desire to attack Montana, and turned to face Sigmund. Song of Tranquility. Taking this opportunity, Montana endured the pain and reloaded the pistol with bullets. Although the gun in her hand fired in bursts, it could only shoot 2 bullets at most. "Give me the gun, you won't kill him like that." Sigmund dodged the attack and said to Montana. The monster in front of him looked terrifying, but in fact it was just an irrational flesh and blood puppet. Sigmund is now much stronger than ordinary people in both mental state and physical fitness. If you are careful, you can still avoid the opponent's attack. "You?" Montana hesitated. "Trust me, I know it." Sigmund's face was calm, and while constantly moving, he had activated his ability to find the weakness of this monster. The woman who grew out of his back. Montana threw out her pistol without thinking too long. At the same time, she interfered with the monster, trying to create an opportunity for Sigmund to attack. Although the abilities of all parties have improved, Sigmund is not arrogant to think that he can suddenly become a sharpshooter. So if you want to hit the monster's weakness, you can only take the risk of dashing forward and narrow the distance between them. Thanks to the strengthening fruit and the body transformation after enlightenment, Sigmund is now full of energy, and more importantly, his eyes can capture many details that are usually not noticed. Although he cannot completely predict the monster's attack, combined with he always responds best to his surroundings. At this time, there were noisy footsteps outside the door, followed by countless roars. The door trembled, and the axe smashed the door panel. "Hurry up!" Montana urged loudly. But Sigmund was unmoved, until the monster rushed in front of him. He nimbly passed through the opponent's armpit, a sliding shovel, and the barrel of the pistol aimed at the place on the monster's back where it connected with the woman. Boom! He pulled the trigger continuously, the projectile shredded the corrupt flesh, the roaring monster suddenly stopped moving, and then let out a shrill scream. Immediately, large swathes of flesh and blood dripped down like melting. "Go and wake up your companions, we're running out of time." The monster was obviously not dead yet. Sigmund calmly avoided and shouted loudly. "What exactly is this thing made of?" He noticed the mechanical structure hidden under the monster's flesh and blood, some of which even had wooden blocks. This rough assembly completely broke his cognition of science. At this time, Montana had reached Gildo, and she chanted loudly, and the light in her eyes became brighter and brighter. The traces on the man's body were squirming like a living thing, as if resisting something. As time passed, Montana's face became whiter and whiter, the whole arm and half of the chest were stained with blood, and the body was even more shaky. After Sigmund reloaded the bullet and fired repeatedly, the connection between the monster's body was completely broken and turned into a pile of rotten meat and fell to the ground. At this time, Montana also seemed to have reached the most critical point. Her long hair was full of wind without wind, and the power within her body was agitated layer upon layer like waves. Click! There was a loud noise, and the overwhelmed wooden door was completely breached. Sophie was the first to bear the brunt, and other servants rushed into the room. A sudden message flashed in his consciousness, but Sigmund only had time to glance at it. "Hold on, I'll block them!" He roared loudly and charged forward. At this moment, a strange melody suddenly sounded from everyone's mind. www.mtlnovel.com affected, Montana's body froze, and her face completely lost its blood. Bang! The wall not far in front of him suddenly burst, and a majestic and burly figure burst out of the wall in a violent gesture against the debris. Secret door! There is a secret door hidden in this room. Montana's eyes were wide open. She wanted to do something, but the sudden mental shock made her consciousness feel like a quagmire. It turns out that the so-called whistle and the call are all Bernardo's conspiracy. He has long been hidden behind the wooden board through a secret passage, and then at a critical moment, "We're fucked." Montana was heartbroken. But just when she felt hopeless, a familiar voice came from behind her. "Old Yin, I finally caught you." Sigmund, who was clearly under the control of the music, turned around flexibly at some point. In his hands, two thick and long iron gun barrels almost hit Bernardo's eyes. "How do you?" Bernardo only had time to let out a roar, but Sigmund didn't have the slightest idea of explaining, and pulled the trigger at the first time. Bam! Crack! Boom! The first projectile exploded in Bernardo's left eye, followed by the second one penetrated from the same wound and into the depths of his mind. The breath of gunpowder filled the air, blood mixed with the shards of the eyeball splashing everywhere. Bernardo's body continued to charge forward under the maintenance of inertia, and then was kicked away by Sigmund like garbage. At this time, Montana had just been freed from the strange mind control. She turned around and looked at Sigmund, who blew away the smoke from the muzzle. He looked at Bernardo's corpse lying on the ground again, with a blank expression on his face.